Hello again, family. Well, this is video number 3 of a group of 4 videos that I'm doing on ancestry, and particularly ancestry for the Evins family. So in the first 2, I sort of showed you how ancestry works and how I got to the all of the Evins that are out there. So today I have picked 10 people. I'm going to do it in 2 parts. I'll do 5 this time and I'll do 5 next time. And what these are what I consider prioritized people within the Evins family. For most of this, I'm not going to be on the screen, but I'm going to show you ancestry and the neat things from our family. So let's go get started. Okay guys, so I have ancestry all up here, and before I start, what I need to show you are 2 things. First of all, you see these little dots over here? One of the things you can do in Ancestry is say, I have people that I want to make a priority. So what I've done within the Evins family tree is I have 10 people that I have prioritized. So if I click on this, it's going to show these 10 people. The second thing you need to understand is as soon as you get past grandfather, so here it has, I start this out and then it's my mom and then my grandfather and grandmother and grandfather, and then it starts in greats. So this will be 1 GG, 1 great grandfather, and then this next one would be the 2nd great grandfather, or 2 GG. So now what you're going to see over here on this is this is the 2nd, the 9th, the 13th, the 11th. So that's what that means. It's grandfather with that many number of greats in front of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about how people came from the British Isles and from other parts of Europe actually to the United States, and how our family was among that group. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start in the early 1600s. So now this is going to be a history lesson. First of all, you remember that the Mayflower is 1620. You remember there was a colony in America before the Mayflower. So let's get our map up here. Sorry, this one. So these are the 3 places between about 1600, 1607 and 1620, 25, something like that. These were the 3 places where there were communities being built. This was Jamestown. This was built by a British company, so they were here to make money. And they formed a colony in Jamestown. It had all sorts of difficulty. They eventually became a prosperous town, and it made its money by tobacco farming and using slaves and by overproduction, and ran into significant issues fighting Indians in that process, natives in that process. So then there is New Amsterdam, which was founded by the folks from Netherlands area. And so remember I said that my ancestry is 50% German from my biological father, 48% English, and 2% is Danish or Netherlands area. This is the 2. We have family that are part of this group. Then there is Plymouth Colony. Okay, so how did the Evins get to America? Which one of those 3 did they come in? That was a trick question. They came to all 3. So I'm going to start today by starting in the early 1600s and talk about how the Evins came to America. So we're going to start with New Amsterdam. So I'm going to go back to Ancestry, and I'm going to show you the ones. So a lot of the Evins family came from William Wesley, our grandfather. So, but Mary Hayden Evins, grandmother, if you start back her line and work your way back, you'll discover some names back here that start to look very much not British. And particularly when you get back into here, and we're going to focus on this person right here. So you can see from our original list of prioritized people, he's this guy right here. So Cornelius Mellon. So Cornelius is the Energizer Bunny of New World exploration. Cornelius, most people in this era thought it a perilous journey and one you would do only once in your life to cross the Atlantic in a small wooden boat. Cornelius did it 11 times. He was from, let's go find his background. So you can go look up Cornelius Mellon on Wikipedia and you can see some pictures of him. So he was born in Antwerp, which was then part of Spanish Netherlands. And let's go back to our ancestry and see some of the pictures of him. So here's Cornelius Mellon. So this is a close-up of what he looked like. So pretty good looking dude, huh? For the day. Very Dutch looking. So this shows some of his, he called him a patroon. So what a patroon is, what they did in the Netherlands is they decided that they were going to colonize, but what we're going to do is we are going to give tracts of land to people, but they got to bring the families to settle it. So we're going to give you this huge tract of land, and you got to find 50 people to come and occupy that land. And then you get to be the boss, but you have your own little fiefdom in the New World. So you get to be a patroon. And so this is what happened with Cornelius Mellon. He was made a patroon and he was sent over. The problem is, if you read this guy's history, man, did he have trouble. So he wound up going head-to-head with Peter Stuyvesant, who was the head of the Netherlands colonization group at the time. He went head-to-head with Indians. There's another picture that you see of him. This is a famous picture where he's selling things to the Indians. Well, one of the things that he was selling to the Indians was firewater, and then taking advantage of the Indians when they used it. But this is a famous picture, and this is him. This is Manhattan, New Amsterdam. Let's go back to the tree and say, how did Cornelius Mellon make it down to us? So here is Cornelius Mellon. He came over, he made up all sorts of trips. One of his crossings, they had a storm and they lost the ship, and he was barely saved in the process. Another one, he had all his, they had a conflict in the New World, and all of his possessions he lost and then regained them. He was put on trial for insubordination. So all sorts of things happened to him. And in the end, he got so fed up with the Dutch that he went over to the other side. He declared himself English and decided that he was going to serve on the English side. And eventually what happened is New Amsterdam gave way and the British took it over. And Cornelius Mellon was there to receive it. And through his daughter Cornelia, and then you work your way down here, you find other names. So this comes through some odd names. Hudson's, Ludlow's, Roxana Diamond, Minnie Gibbs Hayden, and down to Grandma. So that's one of our ancestors. So he came in about 1640, I think, is one of the first ancestors. Okay, so now you got the idea. So what we're doing, let's go back and look at the picture again. So Cornelius Mellon shows up in the early 1600s and he stays. Starts out in New Amsterdam, becomes New York, and eventually he would be the ancestor to Grandma Evins. Okay? Well, what about Plymouth? We didn't have any of the original pilgrims from 1620, but we did have one that was there not soon after. So the one we just saw, Cornelius Mellon, is our 10th great-grandfather. A similar one, another 10th great-grandfather, so about the same time, again in the 1600s, is William Hensley Lane. Okay, for our second person, we're in Granddaddy's era. So this is William Wesley, and if you follow the Evans back a little ways, just follow the men of the family. So from back to Robert, back to David, back to Benjamin. Okay, and you get back here to Elizabeth Lane. So the guy before her, so what I'm going to focus on is this little section right in here. So from Benjamin back to his great-grandfather. So William Hensley Lane came over on the ship the Hopewell. So let's talk about this. Between about 1620, for the first 10 years, 12 years, something like that, it was touch and go as to whether the community was going to be able to make it. And most people who came were Puritans. And they settled in the colonies. And they were seeking religious freedom and a new life. And freedom from the oppressive Church of England and the government in England. And so one of these people was the guy we're looking at here. His name is William Hensley. Well, William had a daughter who married into the Evans family. So Elizabeth Lane is his daughter, and Thomas Evans was the man she married. What you'll notice is that Thomas Evans and Elizabeth Lane died at the same time. So the Great Migration started, the peak years of the migration were between 1629 and 1640. So this is when people in England said, okay, it's safe enough, we got to get out of here. And what became the pioneer group who came over on the Mayflower now gave way to the settler group. So these are people coming en masse. And in 1635, in the middle of this rush, came this group. Elizabeth came, our friend William Hensley Lane, his daughter Elizabeth, and Elizabeth's husband. And they came over on the Hopewell in 1635. They died in 1635. They left and came over. It took about half the year to get here. They got here and barely survived. I don't remember if they got here in December and they died in January of 35, came in 34, or what exactly happened. But they barely made it to the New World, and both of them died. So the family line would have ended there. But if you'll notice, their son didn't come with them. He was born in 1620. So when they came over in 1635, Thomas Evans was still in England. Thomas Evans would then have another son, Colonel John Evans, and he would return to America. But he didn't return to the same place. They came to Plymouth. Evans came to Plymouth, died, nobody would make it back to Plymouth. But their son would then come, and he would come to the booming Jamestown community. He would come to Virginia. And he was not coming because of religious issues. He was coming for money. So this is how the Evans name and the Evans clan made it to America. They tried to come to Plymouth, died in the process, and it would not be until their grandson, Colonel John Evans, whose nickname is Indian Trader Evans, would come to America. So, go from John Evans to Benjamin to David to Robert Henry to Obadiah, who we're going to talk about in a little while later, on down to our grandfather. Okay, so here we are in the 1600s. We've come to the two of the three places. But the Evans who died getting to Plymouth weren't the only Puritans in the family. And 3 years after the two Evans arrived in Plymouth and promptly died, another one would arrive to take their place. Richard Newton, who's right here in the family tree, would arrive and become one of the first settlers He was the settler of the town of Sudbury in Massachusetts. The one reason that I bring him up is, in addition to the fact that this completes the fact that Evins came into all three ports all within about 40 years of when the first people could arrive in the New World. And so they started working from each direction. The other thing is we have a famous almost ancestor. We're related to Robert Newton here, who is the grandfather of Richard, the person who's in my tree, and Daniel, who also founded another town in New England. So these are both Puritans who came to this country, who manifested the Puritan work ethic, who built communities, established churches, were part of the bedrock of the early American culture. But Robert had two sons. He had Richard and he had Isaac. Isaac would then in turn have another son. Yes, this is Sir Isaac Newton, who is considered a genius of mathematics and philosophy, and perhaps one of the greatest minds ever to come out of England. So, we don't have his genetics. We're not directly related to him, but we're not directly related to his grandfather. And it's clear that due to that grandfather, we got passed down some serious work ethic. So, back to the map one more time. So now what we have is that the Evins clan has established beachheads on three places in North America: in Plymouth, in New York, and in Jamestown. And from there, they would begin to work their way across the country until as we see eventually, they would wind up in Texas. So far, what we've discovered is we've answered the question, when did the Evins kin first arrive in America? And it was in the early 1600s, and they arrived in three different places. So what's the next thing that you think of that happened in the United States? Well, all three of those colonies, or that group, would declare war against England. Okay, so the next member of the family that I want to introduce you to is Melatiah Lathrop. One of our family members before us made application to be included in the organization the Sons of the American Revolution. And they made that claim based on Melatiah. And so what was fascinating to me was to discover that Melatiah and 5 of his sons were in the Revolutionary War in the 17th Regiment. So not only did we get here, and here's some pictures of some of the other family members from the time. The company that Melatiah and at least 2 of his sons were in is the company that fought against General Burgoyne at the Battle of Saratoga and accepted his surrender. Okay, so the final one that I'm going to show you is my favorite ancestor. I don't remember much about Grandpa or Grandpa ever saying much about our relatives. I know some people in the family have said that we had Native American ancestry, and I have never been able to find it, and the DNA did not show any of it. But the only other things that I know are Grandma telling us one time about her first dates with Grandpa, where he was driving the buggy across the state line to take her on a date. And I remember Granddaddy telling me about the name Evins. And what he said was that if you find anybody with the name Evins who spells it with I-N-S, you're related to him. Because our whole family spelled the name E-V-A-N-S until one of the people in our family had a dispute with the rest of the family. And and he changed the spelling of his name. So let me tell you that story. So this is William Wesley. His father was James Wesley. Our granddaddy's grandfather, our great-great-grandfather, was Obadiah Evins. So it's spelled here with an A-N-S. He changed it during his lifetime. And if you see everybody, all of the Evans prior to that, spelled it with an A. So Obadiah is the one who changed the name. So who is Obadiah? Here I am, and all our cousins would be in the same line, and these are all of our parents. and this is Grandma and Grandpa, and here's James, and here is Obadiah. So, Obadiah is one of 11 children. This says that Obadiah was born in 1820, and that appears to be by far the earliest, but one of the census reports I had showed that he had another brother. So I don't know if that younger brother didn't live till later or what. But the point is, Obadiah was from a very large family. He was born in Virginia and died in Kansas. So if you look at his birth date, it was 1820 to 1872. So he was born in Virginia. So let's go back and look. You remember I talked about the fact that everybody, when people came into Virginia, people migrated to Virginia because of the money. It was basically a British crown colony, and their goal was to make money. It was a company that sent over all the settlers, and they introduced slavery very early on in the process, and it was a slavery situation. Okay, so I cannot find that Obadiah's father, Robert, ever had any slaves. But so this is his father, and these are his 4 grandparents. So his mother's father, right here, is Royal King. In 1850, they did one of the first censuses of slaves in the country. And you can you can search that census and find out how many slaves a person owned. Royal King, during the 1850 time frame, which is when Obadiah was leaving Virginia and going to Kansas, his grandfather had 6 slaves at that point in time. And so it was clearly, and his grandfather's father actually put slaves in his will, passed on slaves to people. So we know that it was within Obadiah's larger family. And apparently Obadiah was very opposed to it. So if you remember the story of what happened is the Civil War broke out when Kansas and Nebraska were being admitted to the Union. And up until that point, the previous states that had been admitted were Maine and Missouri. Missouri had been allowed as a slave state, and Maine had been allowed as a free state. And so they were trying to keep the balance. The South knew that eventually that there would be more states that would prohibit slavery than accept it. So the state of Kansas, it was a big deal. They had a vote to decide whether the state of Kansas was going to allow slavery or not. And abolitionists from all over the country poured into Kansas. I believe that our grandfather Obadiah was one of those. So here's why I think that. First of all, we know that he had slavery within his family. We know that he was in the census up until 1850. We know that when the vote began, he moved cross-country. He was the only one of his family to leave. All of the rest of these were born and died in Virginia. We know that when the Civil War broke out, his youngest brother, Josiah, would actually join the Confederacy and would die of disease in the war, dysentery. And we know that what happened is Obadiah went to Kansas and was actually involved in overseeing the election that decided whether they would vote to be a slave state and a free state. As soon as and up until then, on all the censuses, 1840, 1850, 1860, he was spelling his name Evans. When the war broke out, he volunteered to join the militia. So this is an article stating that he was one of the people who was an officer to swear in to be able to count votes. His name is right over here, spelled with A-N-S. So in 1861, as soon as war broke out, they mobilized the militia in Kansas, and he signed up. He signed up for a 3-year stint. So he served out his 3-year stint as a volunteer, and then at the end of 3 years, he re-enlisted. He was involved in combat multiple times during the Civil War. And in 1865, when they did an interim census, his name was suddenly Evins. So I believe that he changed his name because he disagreed with the family on slavery. And he went so far as to move halfway across the country to try and sway the vote in Kansas, and then to fight on the part of the Union in the Civil War. Obadiah was a man of conscience, and I admire him very much for that. Okay, what'd you think? What'd you learn from the 5 people that I picked out to show parts of our family history? Well, one thing you ought to see is that the Evins clan was eager to get to America. And they were eager to come here because of religious conviction or because of a work ethic where they wanted to strive to succeed. And they were willing to come any way they could get here. And once they got here, they were willing to fight to do what they thought was the right thing, to break from England. They were willing to fight for their convictions in the Civil War, on both sides of the Civil War. And they've been a family that has done what they needed to do. And I think it comes down to the resilience of the family, the kinds of characteristics that made us who we are. And I'm excited to be part of the family. And next time, I'm going to give you 5 more Evins. These are further back in time, and we're going to show you how not only did we have an impact on this country, but we had an impact on other countries before we got here. So, stay tuned. Until then, thank God for your family.